Chapter 81 The only thing he was certain Abu You are listening at novelfull.audio. At Grey Mansion. Davi just came out from their room when she saw Say sitting on the sofa wearing his black mask again. You really are the best young miss. You just made the young master who hated wearing such kind of mask to disguise himself. He hated it. Yep, he really hated it, but because he couldn't get close to you wearing that black mask of his in public, he decided to wear it. Upon hearing him, Davi felt like she just heard some heartbreaking news. So that's why he hastily removed it, she said as she started walking towards him. And the moment she got close to him, Davi noticed that his lower face's skin was slightly red. By the look of it, his skin might have been sensitive that the mask caused an irritation. Davi's face turned really worried that the man immediately asked her what was wrong. Did you put anti-irritation ointments in your face? She asked, and as expected the man shook his head. Davi then stood in front of him and she held his hand. Come, I'll help you do some light facial treatment, she said as she began to pull him up when Say refused her. No need, it's fine, he said, and Davi immediately pouted, showing him her sudden displeasure for his refusal. Her face also turned sullen as if she was a kid so upset about something. That moment, Say was quite surprised. He didn't expect her to be that unhappy just because he refused. Davi didn't talk again, but she didn't let go of his hand and she remained staring at him with her same sullen expression. Due to that, Say's resistance only lasted for few seconds and he soon stood right away upon seeing her unhappy face. Let's go, he finally said, and the girl's face instantly turned radiant as she smiled wide at him as if her wish was finally granted. She dragged him towards the stairs until they both entered in their room. As soon as they went it, Davi slightly pushed the masked man to sit on the bed. She immediately went and took some bottles with her. Then she dragged a stool and put it in front of him before she sat on it. However, as soon as she sat and looked at him, she blinked 3 times, for she realized that she has to remove his mask to apply the treatment. Seeing the sudden change in her expression, Say reached out his hand, asking her to give the bottles to him. It's okay, just tell me how to do it and I'll do it myself, he said, but to his surprise, the girl seemed displeased again. That moment, Say's brain appeared as though it's starting to go paralyzed. He knew that what's happening to him were nothing but strange. He didn't even get why he's just following what his wife wanted, obediently. He was aware he's doing something he never did before. The only thing he was certain about was that, he doesn't want to displease her. Chapter 82 The warmth of her hands. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Davi's eyes were glued into Say's long and elegant hand while she felt quite disappointed. However, a moment before she finally gives in, something flashed across her mind and she suddenly stood noisily. Wait for me, don't move, she said and went straight to her dressing room. That moment, Davi immediately turned into her mission mode. Step number 18 Part 2. Second step of physical flirting. Davi was glad that she remembered this step before this chance slipped away in her hand. She remembered that Hinari advised her to initiate physical contact when perfect opportunity arises. And one of the examples she used was to offer him a light massage on his scalp or on his back at times when he looked tired. At that moment, Davi was certain that this was the opportunity Hinari was talking about. Thus, she put her hands on her hip like Wonder Woman, then she breathed deep before went back to him. Let's do it. Meanwhile, Say, who was waiting obediently as he sat at the edge of the bed, lifted his head the moment he noticed her light steps coming closer to him. And upon seeing her, his line of sight immediately fell into the red blindfold in her hand, and his brows knitted. The girl finally sat in front of him with somewhat innocently seductive smile. It'll be fine if I use this right, she asked, and the man could only nod. As soon as he nodded, Davi smiled brightly again as she reached out the blindfold to him. Say then took the blindfold and Davi immediately closed her eyes. That moment, Say just stared at her face for a while before he began to wrap the blindfold in her eyes slowly and gently. The room was silent and neither of them made any sound during the whole process. After he was certain that Davi couldn't see him, Say finally removed his mask. "Are you ready?" she asked, and the man just replied a single mm. Davi then ordered him to put the ointment in her palm before she finally lifted her hands, carefully. And the moment her palm landed on his cheeks, Davi's heart started to flutter. However, she remained calm as she applied the stuffs all over his face carefully as ever. The atmosphere was way too silent that Davi could only hear her own loud heartbeats. But at that moment, Davi was actually in her intense concentration. She was touching his face, his forehead, his cheekbones, his nose, his cheeks and his jaw, as if she was memorizing every detail of his face. On the other hand, Say remained motionless as stone as his gaze never moved away from her. He looked as though he was mesmerized by her gentle touches, that he started to close his eyes as he felt the warmth of her hands. "Are you liking it?" Benov calm Davi's voice made him open his eyes again as he uttered a sound. Thank you for saving me. I don't know what could have happened if you didn't came. I used to beat that man into pulp in no time, but it seemed like he grew stronger. Haha. Davi somehow started to relax as time goes by while she continued massaging his face gently. "Do you want to become stronger?" he asked, and she immediately paused as she nodded like rattle. Yes, I want. I'll get you a teacher." "Really?" "Amen." As soon as the man uttered his reply, he went frozen again because the girl suddenly wrapped her hands on his neck, and she hugged him excitedly. Then, she uttered her words just right before his ears that he could feel her warm breath. "Thank you," she said, and then she backs off and continued massaging his face, not knowing that the man in front of her already turned into a hardened snowman with reddish ears. Chapter 83 What Type of Kiss? You are listening at novelfull.audio. By the time the mini facial finally finished, Say immediately wore his mask again before he carefully removed the blindfold in her eyes. "Does it feel better now?" she asked, and he nodded. Feel good." Davi smiled at him as she stood and tidied the things she used. She was curious about his reaction, but since she couldn't see his expression at all, she could only rely on his answers. Shortly after that, someone knocked the door. Say stood and opened the door, and as expected, Zaki appeared. "Did I interrupt something?" he said mischievously before he sidled towards him and whispered something. As soon as Say heard whatever Zaki told him, he immediately turned towards the girl who just stepped out from the bathroom. Seeing them, Davi could already tell that there might be another important thing Say must do. Thus she could only smile and wave her hand dismissively. "It's fine, you can now go," she said, and the man nodded. Davi watched him went out until the door was closed when suddenly, her phone rang. She quickly picked her cell phone and was surprised. The caller was no other than her love guru and best friend, Suzuki Hinari. For the past month, Davi was trying to call her, but the girl wasn't answering at all. She only received occasional messages from her once in a while. "Hello sweetie." "Hello. Hinari. Where on earth are you?" "Haha. Don't worry about me, worry about yourself. I'm in North America." "Then why are you not answering my calls?" "Duh. Because you only called when I'm asleep." Well. How should I know that you're actually at the other side of the world?" "So. How was it? I bet your man is now a putty in your hand." Hearing the words, "putty in your hand," immediately made Davi somewhat speechless. Well, the first thing that appeared in her head was when Say gave her a score of 3 out 10 the last time she asked him. I think we didn't reach to that extent yet. Not even close, I guess. I can't see his reek.org huh. What the hell did you say? With that beauty of yours, and are you saying that my advices actually didn't work on him? Bloody hell. Wait, I can't accept this. Your man might be gay, he might be gay, I'm sure of it. Hey, calm down. He's not gay, okay? How could I calm down? Listen. Actually he is. No, you listen to me, Davi. Did you two even kissed? We did. Well, yeah. I did kiss him. What type of kiss? Ha. Well, just a peck in his lips. Silence followed Davi's statement. Afterwards, she heard a sound of something that was bumped perhaps into a table. That moment, Davi could only imagine Hinari being greatly frustrated that she was lost for words. It's not like there's no impro. Hear me, Davi, just go and jump onto him. Kiss him. No, French kiss him. If he won't reciprocate, kick his ass. Davi could only cough slightly as soon as she heard what her friend just said. H.H. French kiss. Chapter 84 How to French Kiss. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ha. F. French kiss. What are you? Wait. Are you drunk? I'm not drunk. So just do what I said. Ha. You know I don't even. Davi couldn't continue her words anymore. It was because Hinari already ended the call before she could even finish her statement. Ah. This girl. Davi realized that Hinari was surely drunk. She knew about her habit that if she's drunk, she'll deny it, and if she's sober, she will always answer her, yes, I am drunk. Because of that, Davi could only shrug her shoulders and decided to call her again next time. She also knew that this best friend of hers will never give her a risky thoughtless advice. However, before she could put down her phone, it rang again. She looked at it and she just received a mail from her. Upon opening the mail, she choked and coughed again. Detailed steps on how to French kiss, she said, reading the subject of the mail. She scanned the whole thing and was surprised. That moment, Davi sat on the bed and began to read the whole thing. She read it seriously as she started scribbling something in her note. She knew that it's still too early for her to attack him with this kind of high-leveled kiss, and worse was that she actually doesn't even have any experience at all. That's why, she studied it intently, that she even wrote the steps in numbers. She thought that it wouldn't be bad for her to prepare herself for it now. Who knows? It might happen sooner. However, an important note in the end of the mail made her a bit taken aback and she bit her lip. Good French kissing requires practice. Practice, eh? Ah. Davi laid on the bed while her hands were spread wide. She yawned and then she rubbed her eyes. She felt sleepy and tired, maybe because she slept too late making masked cookies last night. She stared blankly at the ceiling for a while and then she breathed deep as things that had happened all day flashed across her mind before she slowly closed her eyes and eventually fell asleep. It was already quite dark when Sei and Zaki finally walked out from Sei's study room. The two walked down the stairs and went straight to the kitchen for dinner. However, when Sei couldn't see his wife on the dining table, his gaze fell into the butler. The miss seemed to be quite busy. She didn't come out since you both entered in your room this afternoon, he politely said, and upon hearing him, Sei immediately turned back and walked away. By the time he entered the room, Sei found her soundly sleeping on the bed. The man then stood there and stared at her for a while, before he sat at the edge of the bed. Davi's long midnight-colored hair were scattered like black silk on the bed. Her face was too peaceful, as if she was a goddess cursed to sleep for thousands of years. Sei's eyes were glued at her face and then, onto the strand of hair on it. He didn't make any sound, but moments later, he slowly lifted his hand and he started to carefully brush the strand of hair away from her face. Chapter 85 Teach Me. You are listening at novelfull.audio. By the time Davi finally opened her eyes, she thought that it was already morning. She blinked and was about to rub her eyes when her eyes fell into the man sitting beside her. She was about to say good morning when she noticed that he was staring at something. Davi followed his line of sight and her eyes turned wide, for Sei was looking at the note she left open before she fell asleep. The things she just scribbled were all at full view that she immediately rose and snatched the note in a violent flash. Say was quite stunned and at the same time, amazed, on how fast she just reacted. He looked at her and her face went unbelievably red. Did you read it? All of it. Yes. Ha ha ha. Davi was laughing awkwardly. She could only scream deep within due to great embarrassment. These are actually my advices to my friend. He was actually an amateur and knew nothing about how to. About kissing, so he asked me for advice. Davi somehow managed to think about something to redeem herself at the last second. However, what her husband uttered next stunned her hard. He. Say's one word was cold. It almost sounded as though he was suddenly angered. That moment, Davi realized her great mistake. A married woman like her advising another man how to French kiss definitely sounds no good. It'll be the same as flirting with another man. No. What have I done? Why did the word he came out of my mouth? Why? He was actually my junior and he's like my younger brother. He was asking dating advices from me for quite some time now, so he's basically my student even before I met you. Although, what he asked this time was a bit improper for me to answer, so I didn't send those advices to him yet. But if you say it's fine, then I'll send it to him. Davi secretly breathed deep after she managed to create an impromptu reasoning. But sweats were actually flowing down her back like crazy. God. This is damn so hard. Why do you need to teach him? Air. Because he is such a wimp, he was such an unexperienced being. He couldn't even manage to get any girlfriend. He was extremely so pitiful, so I agreed. And now that he managed to get a girlfriend, he was asking for advice since he didn't know how to French kiss. Then, what if I ask you to teach me instead? Teach you what? How to French kiss. Davi choked again and she coughed while her face turned even redder. What the hell's going on? Why is he doing this? Is it because he is angry with me? I only accept just one student. Davi gathered her resolve to reject him. She knew that it's impossible for her to teach someone when she herself didn't know a thing. And besides, if she agrees with him, he will surely find out that she was lying. Then, drop him and take me as your student instead. Davi was again speechless. What the hell happened to this man? Is French kissing actually caught his attention? Impossible, he's not even interested in any human. How could he be interested in kisses? Or could it be? Is he just trying to confirm if I'm telling the truth or not? That. I'm actually about to retire now as love advisor. And besides, truth was that French kissing couldn't be taught with just words, you need to practice doing it for real to learn it. That's why. Then, you can just teach me directly. Chapter 86 Say You are listening at novelfull.audio. Davi's final resistance slowly crumpled. She didn't expect this man of all people to suddenly act like this. If he was another person, she would have think that he was just desperately trying to flirt with her. However, the man talking was no other than the stone-cold wooden statue, Say. Davi couldn't believe what he just said, that she suddenly landed her palm onto his nape to feel if he was actually not feeling well. And while Davi's hand was still on his nape, the man talked again. You really don't want to? He asked, and his tone seemed a bit disappointed. That moment, Davi remained motionless as her gaze was locked onto him. She looked as though realization finally dawned on her upon hearing his voice. What am I doing? Isn't this a really rare and unexpected chance for me? Why am I worrying if he finds out I'm lying? This is a perfect chance for me to test the water, right? Ugh. Please brain, cooperate with me. That moment, Davi just imagined herself slapping her own forehead for almost doing a huge mistake. She realized that she must grab this chance no matter what. She also realized that Say will not notice that she has no experience at all, since she was sure he's even worse than her. And most of all, apart from having a partner to practice with, she thought that this will be a perfect chance for her to observe his reaction and to experiment things in a more intimate way with him for the sake of her future ultimate seduction move. At the same time, Davi felt as though she just found a powerful gem she could use as stepping stone for her to succeed. Of course I want to. I'm just testing you if you're serious, she finally replied, and she smiled at him excitedly. I'm serious. Okay then, from now on, you're now my student. Amen. So since you're now my student, I might order you to call me teacher. Is it okay with you? It's okay. But we can't start right away, okay? I mean, well, I need to officially drop that junior of mine first. Davi was actually planning to buy some time because she wanted to watch the video her friend sent her first. She wanted to gather the weapons she needed to ensure that the moment she begin the siege, the castle will certainly fall in her hand. No problem. Upon hearing his certain answer, Davi was about to ask him why he suddenly wanted to learn, when her stomach suddenly growled. Ahaha. I'm hungry, she said shyly. And as soon as those words came out of her mouth, Say finally remembered the dinner he left almost an hour ago. He then stood right away and reached out his hand and helped her stand. At the dining table, Davi was quite happy. She was eating happily that Say couldn't help but just watch her. She looked like she was excited about something, as if something good just happened. So when Davi noticed him just looking at her without even touching his food, she knitted her brows and looked curious. What's wrong? She asked. You look happy, he replied, and Davi just looked at him for a moment before she smiled wide again. I'm happy. Because you're finally here. I'm not eating alone anymore. Davi's words made him speechless. He felt a strange feeling the moment he heard her. It was a really uncomfortable feeling for him that he could only clench his fists slightly. Eat up. You didn't even eat anything yet. Davi continued, and her lively voice and dazzling smile made him just stare at her again. Should I feed you? She asked playfully, and he snapped. No need. Say Say was speechless the moment the girl reached out the spoon near his mouth, even though he said no need. Her eyes were blinking as he looked at her, and he felt like it was impossible for him to reject whatever she's offering him. That moment, Say's ears turned red as he hesitantly opened his mouth. While the girl was just enjoying herself as she kept smiling, as if she was just excitedly feeding her cute little pet. Chapter 87 The Apple of Her Eyes. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Later that night, Davi was lying on the bed when Say walked in. He sat at the edge of the bed for a while before he slowly lay beside her without removing his mask. The entire room was silent, but that moment, a strange familiar feeling was brewing inside Davi's heart as she looked at the man beside her. Sleeping in this bed for almost a month without him was sad and uncomfortable for her. But now that Say was right beside her, she just wanted to hug him and squeeze him hard in her arms. Say. The moment Davi called his name, Say immediately turned his head towards her. However, he was surprised because the girl was hiding her face behind a small white teddy bear. You're the one who gave me this that night, right? She asked, and Say's gaze fell into the face of the teddy bear. He remembered what happened that night, so he knew that the teddy wasn't basically from him. Davi then hugged the bear in her bosom as she continued talking. This little guy actually became your substitute since then. The girl was smiling as he squeezed the bear even tighter. However, for some reason, Say wasn't pleased, and he even glared at the bear in her arms before he suddenly reached out his hand. Give it to me. Davi's brows knitted curiously, but she still gave the bear to him. Say then took the bear from her and he put it on the table right away. Davi just blinked and was even more puzzled. You don't need it anymore, he said. Davi was speechless as question marks began dancing inside her brain. Because I'm here now. As soon as she heard what he just said, she coughed quite a few times and her hand reflexively covered her mouth. She was shocked to the core as she turned brightly red. Gosh. When did this man become this good in spewing these kind of cheesy lines? Are you trying to beat me on my own game? Davi's heart was fluttering like crazy. But, she knew that he might not even aware that his words were damn deadly romantic. And thinking about it made her felt a bit jealous on how easily he could make her heart flutter. At the same time, she realized that Say seemed to be changing for good as time goes by. As she looked at him, she couldn't help but felt a warm fuzzy feeling. She couldn't believe that the terrifying monster she met nearly 2 months ago was just now a soft and adorable masked creature that eventually ended up being the apple of her eyes. Say. Can I hug you? She then asked. And Say couldn't even responded yet when she wrapped her arm around him as she hugged him tight as though he was her long-lost huge teddy bear that she finally found at last. That moment, an inexplicable feeling of comfort and peacefulness enveloped Davi's entire being that she immediately fell asleep without even saying goodnight. Say, on the other hand, who instantly froze the moment she hugged him, remained motionless. He could feel the warmth of her body. He could hear the silent sound of her breathing. He could feel the beating of her heart. Her embrace was like a fire enveloping him, wildly burning every wall of glaciers that built up around him for many years. Until moment passed by and Say finally moved. He reached out his hand and removed his mask. Then, he stared at the girl in his embrace, hugging him as though she never wanted to let him go. He stared at her for quite a while before he slowly turned his body towards her and then he embraced her back. Chapter 88 Soundly you are listening at novelfull.audio. By the time Davi opened her eyes, the sun was already streaming through the window. She was quite surprised since she's always been waking up earlier than the sun ever since Say left. However, what shocked her more was the heavy warm arm wrapped around her waist. Her senses instantly fully awakened and she was stunned. She's always been the one ended up hugging him every time she wakes up. And he's always been the motionless log that never changed his sleeping position the whole night. Yet at that moment, the whole thing seemed to be reversed. For the first time, Say was now the one embracing her and he was even facing towards her. And for the first time ever, she actually woke up earlier than him. That moment, Davi couldn't help but froze. She could feel his slow breath, she could feel his warmth and the movement of his chest as he slowly breathes. Everything was just surreal for her that she thought she was dreaming. And the kind of emotion she's feeling was enough to almost knock her senseless. Thankfully, she still managed to remain calm. She could tell that Say must have been so tired for him to still be sleeping at this point of time. And thinking about it caused Davi to never make a single move. Say was lying on his back while Davi was at his side with her head resting on top of his chest. Thus, a single move from her might wake him up instantly. She doesn't want to wake him up, so she remained in her position. She didn't even raise her head. She doesn't have any idea what kind of work he's been doing, that's why she wanted him to just rest like this. At the same time, she was indescribably happy. Happy that Say seemed to finally loosen up his impenetrable guard. She was happy to finally see him sleeping soundly. So happy that even his slow and manly breathing turned into cute music in her ears. Him sleeping soundly like that just seemed as though he wasn't the cold frozen man who never smiled anymore. Until time passed and the man finally awakened. And as expected, he immediately froze the moment he realized he's still hugging her. He remained motionless until the girl talked softly. "Dnav, are you awake?" she asked, and he finally snapped. Davi was about to rise when he suddenly held her head and he gently buried her face back into his chest. Davi gasped on what he did, but she soon realized what he was trying to do. Thus, she immediately cooperated, obediently. That moment, Davi could hear the beating of his heart loud and clear, but, when she felt him removing his mask and then putting the other back, Davi suddenly felt a strange feeling as though her heart was just stung by something. That moment, for the first time, Davi felt the afflictive frustration of being not allowed to see his face. Chapter 89 It's not like you are listening at novelfull.audio. Just after their breakfast, Davi received an unexpected call from Ms. Lee asking her to meet her right away. That moment, Davi bit her lip hard as she looked at the masked man across her. Ah, what a great timing. Why now? Davi felt as though luck seemed to be not in her side this time. It was because she already planned to spend the day with him now that he's back. She even planned to execute some steps throughout the day and then ask him out for another date. She wanted to stay with him, but at the same time, she knew that there might be important things that her teacher wanted to tell her about her coming exam. On the other hand, Say, who was looking at her, noticed the change in her expression. Is there something wrong? He asked, and Davi immediately cleared her throat. Ah. My teacher is asking me to meet her. I think it's about my coming exam, she replied honestly. It's fine. You can go, But. I told you I'll make up for yesterday's. You can still do that tomorrow. Really, you're not going to leave again? I won't leave. Hearing him said he won't leave made Davi felt ecstatic, and the light in her eyes returned immediately. She was happy to know that he will stay. I'm really glad. I thought you're going to leave again, that's why okay then, I will go right away and finish whatever it is, she said with great energy before she ran away upstairs to get herself ready. That moment, Say was quietly looking at the direction where she went when Zaki popped out in front of him. Are you sure about letting her go for today? He asked mischievously, but Say just looked at him and no word came out of his mouth. However, the man still continued talking. Even though you're so lonely because of her absence yesterday, you'll still let her leave. Hearing his words, Say remained silent for a moment before he finally opened his mouth. Lonely? Did I? Say replied with his usual blank tone, causing Zaki to snap and talked loudly at him, as though he was a mom desperately convincing his son. You're obviously lonely, my keen eyes won't fail me, so don't dare deny it. Even if you think differently, your mood yesterday is definitely loneliness, do you understand? You even looked like you just wanted to teleport beside her the whole time, you know. Upon hearing him, Say's gaze just directed into the opened window as he replied. Even if what you said is true. I can't chain her even if I want to. That moment, Zaki sat on the chair slowly. He looked at the cold masked man as he rested his face on his hand. It's not like you can't, Say. You know you could, but you're just afraid to do anything that may hurt her. Am I right? Say glanced at Zaki the moment he heard his words. However, he continued gazing at the opened window, silently. Chapter 90. Wish her good luck. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Moments later, Say raised his head when he heard the girl's soft steps as she walked down the stairs. Then he just looked at her as she came closer towards him. She was already dressed nicely as usual. Although her clothes were simple, seemed normal and not expensive, her natural elegance and unspoiled beauty just pulled anything she wears into a different level. She always looked as though the clothes she wears were originally made just for her. I'm leaving, she said as soon as she got close to him, and the man stood right away to walk her out. By the time they reached the entrance, a car was already parked in front of them just 3 meters away. Davi then looked at him and he just nodded at her, thus, Davi began walking towards the car. The butler immediately opened the car's door for her, but she suddenly paused. She turned and looked at the motionless man rooted at the entrance and just looking at her quietly. And in the next second, she hastily walked back as she looked intently at him. I need something, she suddenly said, causing the man to went a bit curious and surprised at the same time because the girl is finally asking something she needed from him. What is it? I felt like Lady Luck wasn't on my side this day, so give me something to boost my luck. Hearing her words, Say was speechless. He even thought about giving her the most expensive car in existence if she asks for it, and yet she's asking for a luck booster. Say didn't get what exactly was she asking for. And yet Davi still lifted her hand as if she was an adorable little girl asking her dad to buy her candy. That moment, the man just stared silently at her as if he's trying to figure out what she really wanted, not knowing that Davi was actually in her mission mode. Step number 21, tease him gently. Hinari advised her to do some cute teasing occasionally or even more often if needed. Although she didn't said much about this step, she did reminded her not to overdo it and to always make it clear that she's kidding to avoid being misinterpreted wrongly. Thus, Davi was actually planning to say the words, "just kidding," and then stole a kiss from him before she will run away as usual. However, at that same moment, someone who was standing beside the butler not far from them was miming like crazy, signaling Sei to give her a kiss. Sei on the other hand glanced at him and he immediately understood what Zaki was trying to convey, causing him to begin whacking his brain if she's really actually asking for a kiss. That moment, Sei remembered that Davi was always giving him a kiss every time he leaves. And the thought of it convinced him that those kisses must be her way to wish him luck. And that this time that she's the one leaving, she's asking him to wish her good luck in return. That same moment, Davi was about to do her plan, but, before she could even open her mouth, she was stunned as if a lightning bolt just struck her hard when Sei's lips suddenly landed onto hers, causing her world to immediately went into a halt.